Fine Music Breakfast with Annabelle Drumm.
And I hope you're enjoying our programme. This morning it's Friday the 31st of May. We'll have a look at the weather first of all. It's currently 8 degrees in Sydney. We're looking for a high of 21. And Penrith has warmed up just a little bit. I think it's up to 4 degrees now. Looking for a high of 20 degrees. It'll be lovely and sunny, but a cold wind coming from the south and from the west, which is all the cold places. That's where we were telling you to put your chains on your car if we were going to be driving, because there's ice and snow happening already. Tomorrow will be a similar high, about 20, 21 degrees. Much warmer night tonight. There'll be some rain along the coast and it'll be cloudy in the west. Now, this morning I have in studio two members of a truly specialist international group, drawn together from various countries, including good old Australia. They share a passion for playing period instruments. That means originals from the period of the music or reproductions that were made in the same design from that period. And they also play the music in the style that they were likely played at that time, which is called historically informed performance. So I'd like to welcome into the studio Rachael Beesley and Daniel Yeadon. Welcome along.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming along on such a freezing cold morning.
Well, good to be here.
Yeah, it's really lovely to be here. Thank you very much for having us.
You've both come from different schools in where you were trained with your tertiary education for music. I'm wondering how many schools there are in Europe that do period music in particular.
Oh, good question.
Well, there are many institutions, but I think each institution has a kind of a centre of specialisation that, you know, that draws people to it because of the teachers. Mm-hmm. And I went to The Hague, and that's where Ziegfeld Koken was teaching there, and also Elizabeth Wolfish, who was another Australian musician. Yep. And then I teach there now myself and have been there for the last 20 years. So there are certain places that really draw in and create a network of musicians.
Yes, I was wondering that too. So you must end up with a very sort of close-knit society, Danny. Is that right, where you kind of know each other? You all know who are the specialists in that area?
That's right. Yes, that happens both within cities and across cities. So I went to the Royal College of Music in London, and already at the time of being a student, we were collaborating with people at the Royal Academy and the Guildhall.
Mm-hmm. But not further into Europe. I guess it's just while you were studying.
It didn't take long before we were collaborating with people from Holland and France and Italy and Germany.
Yeah. And this group as well, here all the way down in Australia, you've ended up with a mixture of people from different places. How did you kind of find each other?
Well, I mean, I think that's the fabulous thing about Australia. It really is also one of the centres of historically informed performance now. And
how did that happen?
Well, I think
you could say that we were the trailblazers.
Actually.
Yes, yeah. We a lot of us have lived. Well, I'm from Europe originally, from the UK, but a lot of Ironwood's members have trained in Europe. But we all kind of migrated to Australia about 10 to 15 years ago, and it was partly through setting up Ironwood that I think it inspired younger musicians to set up their own historically informed groups. So it's wonderful to see that whole infrastructure growing.
So now you've said Ironwood, but I haven't actually mentioned that yet. So that you're both working for Ironwood Chamber Ensemble. Yeah. And where did that name come from?
It comes from the wood that's often used to make the classical bows. It's a type of wood, and we had a wonderful moment where we had residencies at Bundanon at the National Trust, and we just had this time together to work as an ensemble and to really form that creative centre, and we've studied a lot of the repertoire, a lot of the classical string quartet repertoire, and also with the piano as well. And yeah, we formed this core of players with Neil Perez da Costa and Danny and myself. And we just invite colleagues to come and join us who have that similar intention to look into the music from the classical and romantic periods and see how we can use the instruments, but also use all the knowledge and information that we have looking at the history behind the composers and the time when these works were being written.
So is that how you get your historically informed performance, that you look into? Because how do you do that if there was no recordings from that time? Danny?
Another good question. So initially from reading literature of the time, so there are lots of musicians and musicologists of the 18th and 19th centuries who wrote treatises about the way music was performed. So we've done a lot of wide reading, but also there are some amazing recordings from the early 20th century. And so we do have some audio evidence, particularly of romantic music, which is now a field that we're really entering into whole scale. We really love exploring all of that repertoire, having explored the classical repertoire quite thoroughly.
And how has it changed from when we look at how people perform now? How is it different?
Well, I think
Rachael?
the expressive techniques employed at the time, well, especially in the 19th century, the use of portamenti, the use of tempo rubato, the use of...
you're not keeping me up here. It's all over my head.
Expressive
What's
techniques
that?
which allow the music to speak in a more personal way, and the musicians to speak in a more personal way. And I think that closeness of the salon, when you think of chamber music, and that intimacy that's brought in when you're performing in someone's home, and you're really you're speaking personally to them. And the musicians had ways to explore that, which wasn't necessarily notated on the page. And a lot of what happens is that we kind of try and unearth and kind of be like detectives and see, okay, what wasn't written but what was implied. And there are some markings in the music that give us little clues towards that. When are those moments where we can actually just spend a lot more time in playing and being absorbed in each little harmonic shift and finding as much detail and nuance in the music as we can, actually.
I think the most striking expressive technique that audiences talk about after our concerts is tempo modification, or the variation of tempo.
Does that
more
change
than we're
each
used
time?
to hearing these days. It changes from concert to concert.
I was wondering that.
Yes.
So when you say it's a personal interpretation, that's like it could actually be different every time. It's
Yes.
like
Indeed.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more fluid in how you move
Yes.
around. So you really have to keep an eye on each other then, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, each time you experiment with these ideas, especially on the historic instruments, so the textures and colours that come through the gut strings, and especially with the piano, we're performing, Neil Paris da Costa is performing on the 19th century Erard piano, and those colours enable us to really find a different balance in the ensemble than you would with a modern setup for this same repertoire. That would require a very different, it's a completely different sound world. So that's, again, it becomes more personal, and it just brings the audience, I think, closer to the intentions from the composer. And in this case, female composers from the 19th century.
This is very cool. So let's have a talk about her. Now, when I first started looking at music from Farrenc, we often just talk about the surname. We go, Farrenc. And then it said Louise. I thought, that must be a typo. Because, how many female composers are there? And then I found, no, it's Louise. It's not Louis. So she just seems like an incredible trailblazer in the 1800s.
Yes, and not just in music. She was fascinating in the way that she explored her musical sensibilities, but she was also a real champion of women's rights.
Really?
Yes, she was a professor at the Paris Conservatoire for 30 years, which is remarkable.
Incredible.
A remarkable tenure.
And she had a baby, and she would tour, and she married another musician who became a publisher, right? Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
So,
yes.
just really... And so the fact that her parents even allowed her to go and study at the Conservatoire and then become a touring concert pianist is just incredible, isn't it?
Yes, she was born into quite a bohemian family, and she was surrounded by sculptors and artists and...
Sounds like heaven to me.
Yes, especially in those days.
Yes.
And that would be like Belle Epoque type era, is that right? Was it late to 1800s?
She lived until, when was it, 1875?
Oh,
so,
okay.
or just
So probably a
approaching
bit
that
earlier.
era. Yeah, a bit earlier.
Paris was just full of amazing people through that time, weren't they?
Absolutely.
Exactly. And sort of the people around her, I think that it must have inspired an extraordinary sort of experience with everyone coming together. Berlioz, and you've got just incredible.
But artists and writers and all of it,
Yeah.
just all the creative people all together.
Yeah.
So we've got a little piece that you're going to be using in your program today. Rachel, do you can tell us a little bit about
We're going to hear the scherzo from the piano quintet. And it's so wonderful to be kind of exploring new repertoire, essentially. This repertoire has been performed before, but when we're looking at it, we sort of feel like we're rediscovering something. And so the scherzo, it's 4-movement quintet, and it's an unusual instrumentation. It's similar to the Schubert Trout quintet, so violin, viola, cello, double bass, and piano.
In fact, we were going to call our concert Not the Trout.
Anything but the trout.
Yes,
this time around.
exactly.
Well, let's enjoy a little piece of this piano quintet by Louise Farrenc. Oh, that was so much fun, and definitely not the trout. No. So at the moment I have in the studio with me Rachael Beesley and Daniel Yeadon from the Ironwood Chamber Ensemble, and they're here to talk about their concert that's coming up this weekend. So that piece of music that we were just listening to was from Louise Farrenc, her piano quintet number 1 in A minor. And Rachael, you were saying that the piano that they were using in that recording was quite modern, so it's quite different, you're saying, from what you're going to be using in your concert?
Yes, well, just the balances and the registers we find on the historic pianos, they were very clearly defined, the registers. And so when you have a composer that writes across those registers, then you get these different colour effects, and a modern Steinway is really designed to be equal sounding across the board. So I really enjoy that as a performer and as a listener to notice those differences. And I think the audiences who come to hear us live will notice that and really recognise how the sort of more fluty range and a little bit more brassy ranges of these instruments.
Exactly. It really is like playing with a wide range of instruments.
Yes, yeah.
And
Danny, where does this piano come from? Because I know that the Sydney Conservatorium, where you're doing your concert, they have a large number of fabulous keyboards. I've actually stood in that room. You can barely walk around it. There's some little harpsichords and all sorts of fascinating things. Is that where it's from?
We do, yes. We have several 19th century pianos. This one, in fact, is privately owned, but it's on loan to us ad infinitum, which is great.
Wonderful.
And so it's a mid-19th century Parisian model by Erard. And one really important feature of all 19th century pianos, or at least mid-19th century pianos, is that the strings are all parallel to each other. If you peer into the piano, they're all what we call straight strung. Whereas if you look if you look to a modern piano, you'll see that the bass strings are actually strung over some of the higher strings.
Is that to save room, do you think, or why would they do that?
It's so that they can have longer strings with a modern instrument, to
make it sound bigger, or what is it?
It's really I think it is literally just so that the longer strings mean that the bass notes have more depth or something. But what's lovely about the 19th century instruments is that there is this clarity right through the range because the strings are not crossing over.
So you don't get that sort of muddying.
They don't buzz,
no,
right?
Yeah.
Because I know that's a bit like the harmonics, isn't it? That if you strike one quite strongly, that the others will vibrate a little bit, or so you don't get that. And also those lovely old, this is not a forte piano, is it? Is that what you call compared to a piano forte?
No, it's an early piano forte.
Right. But when you listen to those, they sound so soft. I always talk about them like being like, have an old slipper. There's something really gentle which reminds you of the salon kind of performances they would have had. You might have literally worn your slippers to sit there and listen to a fabulous concert in your own home.
There's an idea.
Yeah, but this piano, the Erard piano, is a grand piano, so it has the full range of dynamics. So in fact, the louds are actually more dynamic in a way. They're almost more percussive. So as opposed to a forte piano, it is that later repertoire and later instrument. And I think combined with the beautiful stringed instruments that we all are working on and the gut strings, that also gives you that sort of front edge on the sound, but also that sweetness. And it's really fun just to sort of be putting in the slides and the sort of
your interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
and the vibrato around that. So it's a very special genre of repertoire to be working on.
Oh, this sounds like a really great concert. So it's going to be on Saturday night, starting at 6:30, and it's at the Sydney Conservatorium in the Recital Hall West. Now, that's kind of important. When you go in the main entrance and you go down the grand stairway, there's 2 recital halls, the east and the west, so keep an eye out for that. Go west, young man, for this particular concert. Make sure you go to the right one. We're going to hear Louise Farrenc's piano quintet and Schubert string quartet. That's an unusual one.
Yeah, this D major early string quartet was written about 1811 to 13, I think, and it's a beautiful quartet. It really shows this early ideas of Schubert. He puts lots of ideas together, all one after the other. He's really kind of exploring how to develop the string quartet in his own way. I mean, he was so influenced by Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, but he really brings his own lyrical language and his own harmonic nuance to this, and I think there's a lot of sort of folk melodies in this quartet as well.
Yes, I think
give
I
it
can
a very
hear
special.
some influences from the east.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, he lived in Vienna, of course, but I can hear influences from further east.
Yes.
Wow.
That folk element.
Gosh. So it's a lovely mix of these 2 works in the program.
Yeah, no, it really is.
So this concert is at 6:30 Saturday night. Tickets are from $10 through to $45, but we have a double pass to give away, don't we?
We do.
Danny, yay! Thank you so much for offering that. Anybody can call up 9439 4777. And you can go in the draw for this double pass. That will be drawn at 9 o'clock, only half an hour. So you've got to give your call and leave your name and your phone number there. And even if you miss out, you'll still be able to go along. Are there many tickets left, Danny?
There are a few left, yes.
Just a few?
Yes,
got to get one myself. Golly.
We'll leave the name of the winner at the door.
Yes.
So Classicon are looking after the door. So yes, you
Right.
just have to give your name at the door and then you'll be given your tickets there.
And you can buy them online as well, can't you? So you're going to hurry up if you want to do that.
Classicon, yes.
You're going to have to beat me, though, you people. So it's at Classicon, which is with a K, isn't it? CLASSIKON.com. And if you search for the Ironwood Chamber Ensemble, you'll be able to find their concert tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. Thank you, Rachael Beesley and Danny Yeadon, for coming in and talking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.